following is a special presentation of Way 31 News. The unthinkable, the sexual abuse of a child.
I was abused from the ages of 5 to 7.
Innocence stolen from the most helpless among us, and families left shattered.
I'll never forget sitting in court, and I'll never forget a mom's face.
And it happens more often than you think.
Prevalence of it is definitely higher than I expected it to be, I think.
What every parent needs to know. Shattered innocence. Now here's Megan Reyna and Luke Hydash.
You've probably heard of it. Your city probably has one. A child advocacy center, a place for victims of child sexual abuse to go. What if we told you the idea behind these centers started here in Huntsville, Alabama, off Lincoln Street, in this house?
What's known today as the National Child Advocacy Center laid the groundwork back in the 1980s for helping children who were sexually abused. Today, there are more than 1,000 child advocacy centers all across the United States, with others in more than 34 countries across the world. And while the NCAC has moved on to a bigger, more fitting campus for them, still here in Huntsville, this home set the foundation for a countless number of victims to be able to tell their stories.
Over the next half hour, we're going to go over just how prevalent the issue of child sex abuse is here in North Alabama, the resources available to victims and the families,
and the efforts to make sure that these tragic situations never even happen in the first place.
We were victimizing children all over again.
Bud Kramer remembers the start of his career as Madison County DA, spending a bulk of his time prosecuting child abuse cases.
I was a young district attorney. I was elected DA when I was 31, but I kind of wasn't afraid of anything.
At that time, the National Children's Advocacy Center didn't exist. Nothing of its kind did. Children abused were forced to tell their story over and over again. Bud Kramer saw the broken process firsthand.
We were losing them, our opportunity to provide services for them.
So as DA, Kramer started to make change that would stretch well beyond Huntsville.
Knew I needed a family-friendly environment to make that child and maybe the accompanying family member feel comfortable and feel at home. And that was not in my office in the courthouse. I wanted a base where my prosecutors could go, the social workers could go, the police could come to, therapists could come to that needed to talk about a child that they had in treatment, and even where medical exams could be done. So could be a one-stop service center.
We're doing what I never dreamed we could do.
Kramer says his wake-up call to make this one-stop shop came after the story of a young girl named Tina, abused by her mother's boyfriend, forced to tell her story over and over. It wore her out. And Kramer, the one prosecuting this case, was right there with her.
What she went through, I went home one night after I really got into an interview with her with the help of a therapist. Once with her grandmother, I finally got her comfortable talking about this. And I had a child at home the same age. I remember sitting there drinking a glass of wine thinking, I can't get this out of my head. This is so incredibly, overwhelmingly disturbing that I can't leave this.
This is Eileen from DHR.
So Kramer started to think outside of the box.
I can do this differently, and I'm going to do it differently. I don't know what other communities might be doing. I want to find out.
It was then he started the National Children's Advocacy Center at this small house in downtown Huntsville.
You can see the porch of the house.
A place where abused children could tell their story once and only once. Recorded in a safe environment with safe people.
We're going to wake up the rest of the country. People are coming here from all over the country to look at better ways to help.
He prosecuted cases for years. He served in the United States House of Representatives. But for Kramer, all of that pales in comparison to the good work he did at the NCAC.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Everyone who works here is fueled by stories of survival.
Stories like Margaret Holzer's, a Huntsville native, Olympic swimmer, and victim of sex abuse.
Yes! A world record for Holzer. Beisel, a young...
Winning is in Margaret Holzer's genes. The Huntsville native breaking a world record, competing in the Olympics twice, winning both silver and bronze medals.
World record pace.
But Holzer had a bigger goal beyond the winner's podium. She wanted to speak her truth.
I would cry in my goggles. I would get mad at the pool. I would take it out on the water.
In 2008, Holzer revealed when she was a young girl, she was molested.
So I intentionally waited until the games were over But I do think knowing that that was something I wanted to do and kind of having already made the decision to do it, it did take a lot of that pressure off, which I do think allowed me to compete at a higher level. I was abused from the ages of 5 to 7, and it was by a good friend of mine's father.
Holzer said this man was someone she trusted, someone who watched her and her sister often.
This man was kind of like a big little kid. He was always an active participant in what we were doing.
She knew at the time what was happening to her was wrong, but she was too young to know what to do. Ultimately, her abuse ended when the family moved away. It would be years later, while sitting in class learning about sexual abuse, something clicked.
We had it in Huntsville because of the National Children's Advocacy Center.
Not long after that class, at 11 years old, she told someone for the first time.
My 11-year-old friend, who had had the same education as I had because we were in the same class, you know, she had the fortitude to look at me and go, wow, like, Margaret, you were molested.
Following that conversation with her friend, she came to her mother, Elizabeth Livingston.
It was everything a mother did not want to hear, but knew you needed to hear it immediately.
Not knowing what to do, Livingston called 911. After talking with investigators, the family was told to make an appointment with the NCAC, so they did. Holzer did a forensic interview and only had to tell her story once. From there, police got involved. Her family wanted to press charges. Livingston admits it was stressful, but she didn't feel helpless.
When you have a child, you can't turn to page 53 and go, oh, what do I do when my child's been molested? You know, I mean, I didn't know what to do either.
The case against Holzer's abuser was thrown out. They didn't have enough evidence. But Holzer was given counseling and her mother given reassurance this will not ruin their lives.
It's absolutely essential. I owe a debt of gratitude to the kindness of the people. Yeah, this still gets to me at this stage.
Livingston still emotional because she knows without the NCAC, Holzer would not be the woman she is today. And while Holzer's time in the water may have given her a spotlight, God had a plan all along.
God gave her a gift, and the gift was to help her with her true passion, which is helping with child abuse.
This is somebody I knew. This is someone I trusted.
Margaret Holzer has been spreading her message of survival around the country, speaking at events and advocating for the NCAC.
I had no idea, you know, how often this was happening.
When a victim arrives at the NCAC, the goal for the people who work here is pretty simple: to help those who need it and then hand things off to prosecutors who want to get a conviction just like Bud Kramer did. And that starts in this room with a forensic interview.
Investigators and prosecutors watching the child's story from the outside.
A much less scary environment with a lot less people in this room.
Law enforcement in here keeping a recording, writing down notes, starting a case.
While inside, the forensic interviewer follows a strict protocol.
We ask very non-leading questions. It's important that we remain very neutral and we let the child tell us in their own words.
Inside the room is just the child, the interviewer, sometimes even Wilson, the facility dog, here to keep nerves away and the child calm.
Once a case begins, the detective's goal is to serve justice, and oftentimes that means abusers find themselves here inside a jail.
And the investigators who put these criminals here, to say they're busy, that would be an understatement. So we traveled all across North Alabama to take a look at these different agencies and see the trends they're seeing and the issues they face.
I observe the ugly. I deal with the ugly.
It takes a special type of detective to deal with child abuse cases.
And the eyes and ears for our children, I work behind the scenes on these cases.
Someone like Madison County investigator Crystal Bailey.
Doesn't end. It doesn't end. You have to be motivated to be in this unit.
The latest data from the Alabama Department of Human Resources reveals the amount of reported child abuse cases has gone up in the last year, but it's been a mainly upward trend for the past 5 years. In 2017, there was just more than 7,900 reported cases. It then spiked in 2018 to more than 8,900, dropping slightly over the next 2 years, partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Kids were at home away from mandatory reporters like teachers and doctors. Then in 2021, there was more than 8,800 reported cases.
I can tell you last week, I probably got 10 to 12 cases.
We have gotten, I think, 3 or 4 just this week.
DeKalb County investigator Priscilla Paget always has a full caseload, but her motivation is finding justice for the child.
When I know that I can put someone, a child molester, a rapist, a child abuser, when I know that I've got enough that I can put them in jail, that is the happiest day for me at work.
In Morgan County at the Sheriff's Office, it's a team effort to get an arrest. Both investigator Kayla Brooks and Cameron Williams handle crimes against children. Williams has only been in the Special Victims Unit for less than 6 months, but he's already seen so much.
It could happen to any child. The majority of our offenders are family members or friends of the family.
And the abuse online is skyrocketing. More than 25 million sexual abuse images are reviewed by the National Children for Missing and Exploited Children every year.
Everyone has access to the internet.
While technology has made it easier for predators to exploit children, it's also in a way helped the good guys track down these criminals.
I've got friends that are in law enforcement that I can simply give an address to or a phone number to, and they can pull it up and see anything that person has searched.
These investigators pleading to parents to do what they can to protect their kids and monitor what they do online.
You can never be too safe with your kids.
While a conviction doesn't come out of every case, justice is served in some.
Coming up, the lasting trauma from those who suffer a lot more than most people could imagine.
Following content may not be suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Statistically, women experience sexual abuse more than men. According to the CDC, 1 in 5 women will experience rape or attempted rape.
That's a very different story for men. That statistic becomes 1 out of every 38. One of them right here in North Alabama, and he is telling his story 40 years after his assault.
But she sat down and she made photo albums for each kid.
Randy Gautreaux is 56 years old. He looks back at his childhood as a happy one. A loving mother, a caring father, a very special big brother. What he shares with that brother, though, it's something he wishes he could forget.
It's a very violent act. There were like 4 guys teenagers from another neighborhood, and they would come over and kind of single us out. And they got my brother too.
At just 4 years old.
There were 2 places that these attacks would happen, and they would just single one of us out at a time.
A forgotten rape for 40 years.
I go back in these episodes to where I go back as that 4-year-old, but I'm thrown back into that, like immediately I'm thrown back into where these acts are happening with these guys holding you down and stuff like that.
Gautreaux suffers from dissociative identity disorder, a form of multiple personalities disorder. In plain terms, he has flashbacks, and at their worst, they're happening every day. But now, fortunately, they're more manageable. They happen maybe once a month. And these flashbacks are ones that bring him back in time to relive the pain of his own rape.
I always thought that kid was another kid, but it's a projection of you over there. You get yourself outside of your body to kind of go through it. So the other kid is me, pretty much. It's just so violent. And I think that's why it's so important to kind of speak up about it. The first bite sends pain from my small backside.
From the time of that rape in the late 1960s to 2010, Gautreaux was unaware that it had even happened. Such a violent act, his brain suppressed it. But in 2010, 40 years after the assault, it was a conversation with his brother that brought it all back.
I finally kind of put stuff together. So I called my brother one night, and I was just distraught. And I told him, I said, I want to ask you some questions. And kind of yes or no's, but not too detailed. I'll never forget it, because at the end of the conversation, he said, I was hoping they didn't get to you.
A period of severe depression followed. He even came close to committing suicide, all because of one new, fresh, horrible memory.
The thing about the house was the mattress, because you're pressed down in that mattress and you're having trouble breathing.
Years of therapy, tough conversations, and self-realization later, it all led to a new Randy Gautreaux. One that helps others, so that stories like his become a thing of the past, and another child doesn't have to go through that same pain.
People have got to be so aware of what's going on right now.
At the time of his rape, the National Children's Advocacy Center, it wasn't even an idea. For Gautreaux, knowing that a resource of this magnitude is here now, it brings him comfort. Comfort in knowing that stories like his can one day only be told in the past tense. Even though Gautreaux didn't get justice in his case, he says he's happy. Happy knowing that the system improved and criminals like the ones in his case are more likely to be caught.
And when sex abuse victims do come forward, it's important that they tell the truth when they tell their story. But honesty is a two-way street. Lawyers have to be upfront with those victims about the likelihood of a conviction.
I'll never forget sitting in court and I'll never forget a mom's face.
In investigator Priscilla Paget's office, a local paper is pinned to her wall. On the front page, an indictment of a former Fort Payne teacher recently convicted of sex crimes involving his students.
He had 9 victims.
He has a twin brother who was also a teacher and involved with similar crimes.
Twin that made a deal this week, there was one victim, a female. This one's victims were all male.
Paget says they both made a plea deal, resulting in less jail time. But any jail time is a victory for investigators and prosecutors.
Child abuse in general is a Class C felony. They're not going to go to prison for life.
Gabrielle Helix is a domestic violence resource prosecutor for the Alabama Office of Prosecution Services. She helps all 41 district attorneys' offices in her state. Previously, she was an assistant DA in Madison County working with the NCAC.
When you are isolating, grooming, coercion, intimidating your victim to the point that it's not a bar fight because they can't fight back, you have this uneven balance of power, and to me that is the most offensive crime in the justice system.
Still, Helix respects the justice system and says she has to be realistic with each family.
As a mother, if someone hurt my child, I'd want them under the jail. Well, under the jail is not a punishment that we have, but they're not going to get life. And so it's managing those expectations.
And even if it feels like there's evidence, it still may not be enough to win over a jury.
So we have to get a case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is we have to worry about, is it with admissible evidence? We may have a lot of evidence, but not all of it could be admissible.
But for some victims, the priority may be focused on getting the child to safety. Someone like Kanae Tinker, a teenager living with her aunt, Sonia Clemens, in DeKalb County, away from her accused abusers, who she says is her own mother and father.
When I would go to school, I didn't ever really know what was going to happen when I came home.
Tinker says since she could remember, her parents were physically and emotionally abusing her. When she was 11, her aunt and grandmother caught on.
You don't have to be the parent to pick up on that. You just have to watch the child's emotions.
They discovered bruising on Tinker's body, took photos, and went to the police.
When you take a board that you have made and you whip a child, if you want to call it whipping, and they admitted that she would get 25 plus licks multiple times a day. She could have got 100 licks a day. That is nothing but child abuse.
The parents were charged with domestic violence in the 3rd degree, a misdemeanor. DHR placed Tinker with her aunt and uncle in December of 2019. She felt free.
She's not the same child that she was. She knows now she's loved. She knows how to be clean. She knows how to hold herself. She knows that we're proud of her.
And now she has dreams.
I see a future, actually, now. More than what I did.
She wants to go to college. She wants to be a veterinarian. She told me yesterday if she couldn't be a vet that she wanted to be she loves to do hair.
This is my makeup / hair.
And during these past several years, Tinker has been healing. She loves volleyball, doing her hair, making straight A's, and hanging out with friends. She finally feels at home, asking her aunt and uncle to legally adopt her, a couple who never planned on having kids of their own, but have no regrets saving this bright young girl.
Couldn't think of enough, honestly.
We just want her to know that she's loved. She'll never be abused. You know, as long as my husband and I are alive, she'll never be abused.
An important part of a child's journey after abuse happens in a room like this.
Yeah, coming up, the importance of therapy and how it's helping survivors find hope.
Every child's journey will look different, but it typically includes therapy.
The NCAC uses evidence-based therapy, proven to be the most effective way to help survivors recover and heal.
Mind and respect so-and-so's
It took
parents.
years after her abuse for Margaret Holzer to dive deeper into why she was so obsessed with winning.
But I felt like I had to keep throwing in all these accomplishments into the pit of despair.
Instead of channeling emotions by acting out, Holzer put her energy into succeeding in everything she took on.
Just to walk into a room and feel normal, or to feel good enough, or to feel like I deserve to be there.
It wouldn't be until she told her story to the world that she felt the pressure lifted from her shoulders.
But then I didn't necessarily have self-worth.
She does now. It took years of therapy. Therapy that began when she reported her abuse at 11 years old.
Our focus was to get a little girl back to doing activities 11-year-old girls do.
Therapy wasn't easy. It took a toll on the entire family.
I was told by the counselor to go walk the dog for 10 minutes out and watch my clock and then turn around and come back for 10 minutes. 11-year-olds should be able to do that. Margaret hid in the closet.
Margaret's mom, Elizabeth Livingston, says it took 3 years for Margaret to just be able to spend the night at a friend's house.
My counselor actually said, as an 11-year-old, she told my mom, at some point, she'll probably want to come back to counseling as an adult, when she starts dating, becoming sexually active, that thing. And she was right.
A lot of times with their development, they may not have all the context they need to process everything at that moment.
Therapist Kate Hall specializes in child trauma.
The earlier that we can intervene, the better.
She says every child's experience will look a little bit different.
The therapy process can be shorter, it may be long, it just depends on what is going on in the child's needs.
But Hall says they rely on research-based methods.
Starting with learning how to identify emotions and process emotions and talk about them, and then working on practical coping skills to help that kid through not only the processing of the trauma, but also in the future.
And with the amount of cases the NCAC handles, each therapist has a lot on their plate.
Pretty busy. I know that we almost always have a therapy waiting list.
But hearing stories like Holzer's is what motivates Hall to continue helping kids find worth and know there's life beyond abuse.
There's more successful outcomes with these evidence-based therapies, especially when a caregiver is involved and supportive.
And Holzer had that support system through it all.
It was painted green.
And for her mother, she knew she had the NCAC.
Everyone needs to have this agency in their life if they're in the situation we were in with Margaret.
The resources here at the NCAC are free, including therapy. It relies on donations and grants to keep serving our community.
In 2020 alone, the NCAC helped more than 1,500 kids across 1,500 cases. That's 1,500 stories that were only told once, 1,500 families that were helped, 1,500 lives potentially saved.
People here want to keep your child safe. Let them know about the warning signs, how to prevent them from becoming another statistic.
Thank you for watching this special presentation of Way 31 News. For more than 60 years, North Alabama has turned to Way 31 for trusted news, weather, and information. Coverage you can count on air, online, on your phone. Way 31.